Hello, thank you for watching my video on getting started wargaming for the Osprey game, The Men Who Would Be Kings. Now this video is more of an introductory video for people trying to switch over from, say, something like Warhammer to historical wargaming, and I feel that The Men Who Would Be Kings is a pretty easy game to do. In this video, I'm going to cover choosing an army, planning that army, and building it, along with some extras like terrain and little things like that. Now, the most important thing is that a game like The Men Who Would Be Kings leaves a lot of the rules open to interpretation. It's more of a gentleman's game. You can play it in tournaments, but it's not something, like Warhammer or something like that, where it's very strict on rules. And because of that, it leaves it open. You can actually make some very interesting historical armies without getting bogged too much down in point sets and rules and the abilities of certain things. And that's what I like about it. Now, when it comes to choosing an army, you're sort of going to be fenced in, not that much, but on the availability of models and what time period those models fit. Though with historical wargaming, there are companies like Wargames Foundry, North Star Miniatures, and many others that make a massive variety of models. And if you have conversion skills, that's always an option to even further expand what you can do. But so you're going to have to also concentrate on research materials for your chosen period. With some periods, it's easier than others. I focused on British India because there are a lot of accounts and regimental histories and campaign histories available, and for relatively low cost. That you may have to do some research on the particular details of the model and which era they fit best. And that sort of brings me to some of the more interesting things. Now, over the course of your research, you may find that certain pieces of equipment that were used by the Army, while not exactly perfectly suited to a role, could have been utilized in that role. And a good example I'd like to use, what I found, was the 5-inch breech loading howitzer used by the British Army. Now, the 5-inch howitzer was a field gun. It was actually a little heavy for what it was. And so, while it wouldn't really fit the role of a mountain gun, as it's kind of laid out in the Men Who Would Be King's rulebook, one of the great things about it is that it made use of a shrapnel shell. Now, while a shrapnel shell wasn't the most normal ammunition used for the 5-inch howitzer, they were available. In the use of a shrapnel shell with a timed fuse, you could actually use it in close support. That's not normally the role for that sort of gun, but it could be used that way. And if you wanted to even go further, with the rules being very, very loose and very squishy, you could make it as a gun that's not mobile and perhaps add 2 extra crew. I mean, that's the great thing about the way the game is. It's very open to player interpretation. And that's why research is so important, is you can make an army with a lot of character and very unique to you, while still being very historically accurate. The next part you really have to do is plan, and you have to really figure out your army's size, and you have to look at the models that are available and see what's the best value and what's going to allow you to make the units of the size you want without the extra models that you may not need. Now, a lot of people, including myself, you're going to end up with a lead pile the more you collect with little spare models, and you can always revisit that for things you may need down the road. Basing is also incredibly important. You're going to want to plan how you're going to base your army. I chose to go magnetic, and while it's a little bit more work, it's not much, and it really makes a difference as far as transportation, and especially on the artillery bases, it's just a lot easier. You can plug the guys in; they're not going to fall out, and so it's little things like that that are involved in planning. Also, your paints you're going to need to buy, but not only that, more importantly, your actual paint scheme, the order in which you want to do the models and do them in the most efficient way, as well as what's most suitable for you as far as groups you can paint. Now, I think it's most important to be consistent and to have a repeatable paint scheme, and to just work a little bit every day, even if you only paint the straps of a model. That's better than doing nothing, and you'll be surprised how quickly you'll get an army done. I got my last army done in 2 months and 8 days of just consistent work. It wasn't hard. It didn't bother me to do it because I did a little bit at a time. Now, when it comes to actually assembling your force, I would always say in a 24-point field force, it's always a safe bet if you don't know what you want to just have entirely infantry army. Uh, per every 24-point field force in the game, it typically limits you to having only one piece of artillery. You could always have more. It's up to you, and it's up to your opponent. But It's probably more for your benefit than it is for your opponent. If you read a lot of battle reports, or you play games, the artillery typically gets overrun, and that's because people don't leave a unit back to protect it. So the more artillery you have, while it's useful, you do have to protect it, or you're going to lose it. But if you're basing something off a historical army or something you read about a campaign, you could mix it up if there was something a little bit different. One good scenario is something like picket guard or forage guard or something like that, where the horses would be foraging on campaign, as in India, where you'd have a few cavalry units out there on cavalry picket and a couple units of infantry. So you could have a field force with 2 units of cavalry and 2 of infantry. I don't know how competitive it would be, but it would be within historical plausibility. And something like a picket guard or a grazing guard being set upon by a group of enemy skirmishers would be very plausible, and it actually make for a good scenario. One of the last considerations I wanted to talk about was in the extras, and that comes down to like terrain and little things to help enhance your game. And these are pictures of Pakistan, kind of the Pakistan Afghanistan border area. And you can see it has some really nice fall foliage, and so things like your fall trees that you think would normally be used for a game in Europe or America or something would actually work quite well if you were saying in India. And so you have to kind of do the research and look up what the terrain in the area looks like. And really, the terrain is almost as important as the armies. It has its own character, and it makes the game more enjoyable. And a game like this isn't really a game you play to compete, to go to tournaments. And though you can, it's really meant to be played for the enjoyment and the atmosphere, at least I think. And this is some of the terrain I actually made a few years ago that I think would be very suitable for some of the campaigns. And it's something a little bit different than when we think of fighting on a northwest frontier. And in closing, the army that I decided to do was an army based off of the first Miranzai expedition in January of 1891. And the unit I chose was the 23rd Sikh Pioneers and the number 4 Mountain Battery, the Hazara Mountain Battery. But this army is pretty suitable from around 1891 to 1900 or so, 1900-ish. Uh, and it's a mix of Wargames Foundry Sikhs in their Darkest Africa range and artisan Indian mountain artillery. Another good resource would be the Let Adventure forum or the miniatures page. There's a lot of knowledgeable people on there. But I read around a dozen books or so specifically to find out more about this army and more about the equipment they used, so I could best reflect their abilities. And one thing I actually forgot to mention is that you should try to avoid overrating your troops. I've rated everybody as just regular troops. The artillery are a well-drilled mountain gun. The infantry are just regular infantry with no modifiers one way or the other. You should really avoid running an overpowered list. You should rate the armies fairly, and at least for me, if I'm going to do regular infantry as an example, I start at the regulars and actually go down from there typically. It would be pretty unusual for anyone to rate higher. Gurkhas, maybe. Now, this is a list of books that I used in my research to create this army. It's not just useful for India, it's useful for British and other armies that use British equipment. And it's even useful for the Afghans and some of the enemies of the British. It's not an exhaustive list, but it is most of the books I used. If you like this video, leave a comment. If it was bad, leave a comment. And anything works for me. If you want to see more, please let me know. And thank you for watching.